I haven't. It just shut off though, so you should be able to shut it off.
Masterclass, right?
Yep. Check, check, check. Good. Okay. So that doesn't give you any issues. Nobody's here yet? All right. Do you have it recording?
Or on the camera.
Okay. I think something's wrong, man. Don't know why people aren't here. Boom. Starting. Here they come. How goes it, everyone? There's only two of you, Sean and Linda.
Going great.
Hello.
Good, good. Hello.
Good. How are you? Are you fully recovered?
I think I am every week. I think I'm 90% recovered every week, and then I realize I'm really not.
Oh,
But
wow.
I would say I'm a true 90% this week. Caleb, what do you think? 90%? You're pretty close to 90%. So I'm not 90% yet. What's up, Swackhammer? Can't hear you. Can't hear
Hey,
you.
how are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good, good. Great day. It's beautiful here. It's like 70 degrees in Pittsburgh in November. You can't beat it.
Oh man, I'm out in, my dad's out splitting wood right now. And out, he's got logs out. There's had some big trees that went down. So he's trying to do this in our log splitter. And I was like helping him do it just before I came out here. I think I made Caleb a little nervous. I was going to join late, but have no fear, Caleb. I'm here. So that's great weather. We have some nice weather, but it's gotta come to an end here pretty soon.
On Wednesday, so we're enjoying that too. So
Nice. Can you hear my little girls in the background? They're outside. I don't know what they're doing. I don't think you guys can hear them. Hear that? They think they're coming in. Here's what they're doing. They're coming to give Caleb some chicken eggs. Guaranteed. I'll try to bring him behind here. I won't tell him you guys can see him. Come on in, girls. Come here. Come here. What are you guys doing? Come here. You're gonna get the mats? Oh. Did you bring any chicken eggs? Sadie, come here. What are you guys doing? Huh? Giving Caleb some chicken eggs, some crazy good eggs, people. Crazy good eggs, because his wife is having their first baby tomorrow. So we'll get some pictures and post them.
You need some crazy bread, Little Caesar crazy bread to go with the crazy eggs.
Hey guys, Eric's computer just restarted, so we're working on getting that up, and then we'll get started here.
Kevin, what's that background you got there?
Well, Linda, you know I need to be in a room most of the time, so
You need to be in a what?
a padded room. I'm apparently in need of a padded room. It's actually supposed to be a podcast studio, but the lighting is terrible for a video call. It's clearly meant for audio, but it's nice and quiet in here, so I decided to camp in here today.
You know, I watched. Can anybody hear me?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yep.
I watched the documentary on that in Rhode Island about that band, whatever it was, where that nightclub it caught on fire and all those people died. Anyway, their nightclub was lined with that foam, so it's highly flammable. Just to tell you, because that's what they blame the terrible fire on. It was like a 80s band, one hit wonder person, like not White Snake, but something. Great White, I think. But so be careful, don't smoke in there.
I definitely won't. It's kind of unsettling. I know there's some very flammable around me.
All right, my computer died. We had our power plugged into my USB thing down there, and obviously doesn't power it as strong as it should. So lesson learned. And Caleb, no, can people see me? Can you guys see me? No.
Not yet.
And then I just sent a message to Chris. He's joining. There we go. So I just want to make sure that you guys are interested in this topic. We're going to Chris Connor, Stephen and Henry know Chris. Some of you guys, other guys may know Chris. This is a conversation that is really going to be, you get the question a lot, like, I've got a cool business, I should franchise it. And this is going to be a video or a webinar or masterclass that you could send them, because everyone thinks they have a really good idea that they should franchise, and they probably shouldn't franchise it, or at least they don't get really good advice on it. And so, I wanted to bring this into this group because some people are franchisors in here. Some people will probably be franchisors in here, or we'll just have really good questions as they might partner with somebody that is becoming a franchisor. That's how I started. So that's the real purpose for this masterclass. So, and like Bob, you've worked for franchisors before. So guys and gals, stick around. It'll be kind of an interview style masterclass. If you have questions, put those questions in the chat, and I might just bring you up to ask those questions, or I'll just ask it to him as I see them coming up in the chat. So that's how this one will go. What do you need?
I love this when we were doing like
Come back to it. So for some reason, I go blank again. I'm just going to hop up, finish this on Caleb's computer. So there'll just be a little delay. Chris, are you there? He's connecting to audio. Here we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you. How you doing?
Excellent.
Dude, we can't, can we see you? Can we? Okay. There you are, right in the middle. Awesome, man. Well, you probably see some familiar faces and names. Henry Kim is in here. I don't know if you know anyone else in here. And I just told them, Chris, what the purpose of this one is for. They'll put questions in the chat, and everyone's a franchisee here. We might have a franchisor or two. And some of these people will probably be franchisors at some point. So the purpose of this is really, it's a franchise tribe masterclass, really for people that want to become a franchise. They have a successful business or a business they think is successful. They think it's franchisable. It may or may not be. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this masterclass, is to see what kind of businesses are franchisable. And then if they are franchisable, how do you build a plan to take a successful business model and turn it into a franchise and bring it to the market? So that's what we're here to talk about today. So Chris, thanks for coming on. And why don't you give the group a little bit of your background?
Awesome to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. I have been in the franchise development space for 21 years. Originally worked for a firm in Chicago where, kind of learned the trade and how franchising worked and what was involved in it. I guess what's been maybe unique about my experience in franchising is I've worked almost entirely with startup franchise systems, helping bring them to market, helping position them so that they could franchise, so that they could get into the franchise space, creating a lot of the plans, doing the modeling, doing the development of franchise programs so that these models could go to market. As part of the team that launched Jimmy John's, that was probably the most prolific one, I guess, that I was a part of from the very beginning. European Wax Center, worked with the Coba brothers right out of their dad's med spa when they came up with European Wax, AMP and Mini Marts, Restoration One, and some others. So it's been a unique vantage point just to be at the very beginning stage, kind of the precipice of this launch, and that's what's been been both exciting and it's been great to be able to just capture those experiences of working with entrepreneurs to get into franchising, get into the idea of scale, is probably the bigger picture reality of it that people need to get comfortable with and get that mindset of transitioning into. So I started FMS in 2009. I'm based in Atlanta, and I've gone through this process with well over 2,000 brands in 21 years to get into the franchise model.
So we'll get into the different ways that somebody can launch into a franchise, their brand into a franchise. It's working with people like you. It's going straight to an attorney to work on the FDD, and then they kind of do everything themselves. Working with you is kind of like you are the GC or the project manager, and and that's just my way of looking at it, Chris. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but there's a lot of different ways to go from a successful business to a franchise, and you're able to do it at a very reasonable cost with a lot of brands. Would that be accurate? Well,
it is. Yeah. I'm a big proponent. So my first 8 years Sorry. My first 8 years doing this, I was part of a different firm, and it was it was a high dollar, high investment kind of launch your franchise offer. And I saw a lot of systems go to market underfunded when it came to the marketing and the stuff that it takes to actually get leads in and begin building a lead funnel. So I'm a big believer that try to make this as reasonable as possible, get to market, and then start to push your offer out there. That's how you really get traction. So that's definitely a core component to how I approach the market.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. And again, any of you mastermind members, you have any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll either bring you up or I'll ask Chris the question. But so it goes back to the beginning. I bet everybody on this Zoom somebody knows you're in franchising. Somebody comes up to them and says, I've been told I should franchise this thing, or you're in franchising. I've got something that I should franchise. And if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen to you guys. And it's so difficult to know where to send them and all of this. So what do you tell people when they first come to you and they're like, Chris, I've got this incredible business. I'm amazing. I've got so many SOPs and everything ready to franchise it. Everybody's telling me I should franchise it. Like, what's the first thing that you say to that person?
To tell me your numbers, show me what the financials look like. The numbers don't lie. There have been a few cases where some brands have been able to launch franchises without having the financials in place to be able to show someone a really valid business model. But 99% of the time, the successful franchises are showcasing numbers that are attractive. And at the core of this whole thing, that's what a franchise model is. We're selling people the opportunity to invest. We're selling them a proven business model and a concept that hopefully we figured out, know how it works. I don't think that you need to have numbers that are, showing people how they net $1 million a year necessarily. But what I would typically look at when I'm talking to someone about a business is how many years does it take for you to get a return on investment after factoring in franchise fees. So if it takes $100,000 to open up a location, and it's a fixed location business, we need to be able to show someone an ROI on that 100,000 within 3 years after factoring in a franchise fee and a royalty. If it's a service model, probably within a year to be competitive and attractive. Those would be kind of like the benchmarks. But if we can if we can have numbers that are better than those and show people a faster ROI, all of that's going to make it even more compelling. The ones that I've talked to, where I talk to every day, I guess, are where it's like, man, you should put franchising on ice and come back to it as, hey, I don't have a prototype yet. I don't have any financials yet, or we just got started. We're working up to profitability. It's going to be a long road. It'll be a tough pitch. And plus, I mean, there is some liability in this. I think everyone on here surely is familiar with that side of it, that if we sell a franchise of something, there is an expectation that we've figured this thing out. And if someone could potentially make a claim that, hey, you sold me a bill of goods and, this thing wasn't really fully baked when I bought it, then, that could potentially lead to problems. So definitely want to make sure the numbers are there. I'm a huge advocate for technology and systems. And, I have endless respect for entrepreneurs. Just could not think any more highly of anyone who has stepped out on their own and started something and built something and done something on their own. There are some great entrepreneurs who are very talented, very skilled, and in some cases, the business is successful because of them. And we can't make that work in the franchise model. So I want to see as much technology, as many systems baked into this thing as we can. I also like to pay special attention to how we get our business. And I'm willing to bet everyone on this call here could probably sell just about anything to anyone. And that's inherent in entrepreneurship. We are generally, salespeople. We're sales oriented. A lot of franchisees can be and will be, but for a franchise to thrive, you need to make business development as replicatable as possible. How do we get our leads? What is the conversion process? What are the mechanics around that? How many leads to a consultation, to a close, and how do we replicate that? The tighter that is, the easier this whole thing is to replicate. And I think, again, everyone on here has either been through this or knows about it, but there's like this 90-day window for a franchisee where they are freaking out. And if you can get them through that and on the other side of it, a lot of times they'll thrive, they'll get comfortable, they'll turn into a happy, successful reference for us. But if we don't have that marketing and sales model fully baked, then they may not get through that. And then, it's tough to scale and tough to get that critical mass in our franchise.
So you hit on three things: technology, systems, and marketing, sales, conversion. What are some examples of a franchisor that has really good technology?
So there's a bunch. I mean, today's day and age, there's kind of endless, there's technology for everything. But we have a brand that we just launched about 2 months ago. They're in the glamping business. And who in the heck would have thought you can franchise a glamping business? But every part of this model is baked around their software platform, their booking, their scheduling, how they generate their leads, how they communicate with the guests, how they manage their reviews. All these things have been structured in a way where they can plug and play and open up a market and get someone into it as efficiently as possible. What I think the obvious things technology does is it allows you to put someone in business who maybe isn't crazy skilled and give them a high likelihood of success, or a higher likelihood of success. What it also does in a model like this, I think it's even more evident. And if any of us are in service models, one of the objections that I find that we get more when we're pitching a service model is, well, why don't I do this on my own? Like, what are you going to do for me as the franchisor? I get it. You've got a nice brand. You have things, but I could do this on my own. Where maybe like a fixed location business, there's a little bit more of an air of, I need you to do it. Technology differentiates the offering. And the more in depth we can show the platform, the operating structure, and how easily duplicatable and scalable this is. We've sold 8 units in 45 days with these guys. Every one of them, I believe, is really directly tied to the fact that the tech is deep, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to see how it duplicates. One thing I'd like to point out here, though, is I am not a huge advocate for building your own custom software platforms. I've got way more nightmare stories about that than I do good stories. Great if you have a background in that, or maybe you've already done it. Certainly would be a benefit to have your own custom software, but I would not go down that path until you have fully exhausted every other off-the-shelf software platform. I've just seen a whole lot of people drop tons and tons of money into building a custom platform and then end up with some, half-baked kind of software. So tech
so
is
this
important.
glamping business, do they have, and I'm guessing it's not proprietary.
No, yeah, all off the shelf stuff. What they've done is combined it, though, so they've used a number of platforms together.
See, and I think that's fine. A lot of times when we think about technology as a franchisor or franchisee validating something, we think it has to be unique to them or proprietary. And I'm with you. I don't think it does, because it takes enough work being able to take off the shelf stuff and then integrate it with all the other things that actually work well. So, and I think we're going to be hearing more about franchisors utilizing technology. We all know Orange Theory was one, and they did it themselves and whatnot. And that was really good. But I think technology, I just about did a post about technology in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group today, but I went a different route because someone was wanting to know about hiring employees and giving them phantom equity. So I went that route instead, but I was literally going to be posting about examples of good technology. And I was going to do follow-ups around proprietary versus off the shelf. So that's a huge thing. Good systems. Everybody says they have good systems. Every franchisor says they have amazing processes and systems. And, as a cynical buyer, you're like, whatever that means. But then there's some that are just like, wow, that's amazing. So what is garbage and what's amazing when you hear good systems and processes?
Yeah, and I do think that's one of those overused buzzwords when we're building our value proposition to sell our offering. It's just, it means nothing at this point. So I do think to make this part of our pitch is to have specifics and being able to show it to people. Another brand that we're working with is a fencing brand called Big Jerry's Fencing. There is an actual Big Jerry.
I've talked to Big Jerry before.
Oh, nice. Yeah. He's like 6'13", so he's enormous. He has a group of different software platforms that allow him to estimate, quote, give the proposal, and close the deal with a buyer before he ever even speaks with them. They pay before the first time he's ever even speaking with them. And if you think about that business, one of the biggest, time sucks is that you're going out to all these customer homes, quoting them, talking with them, and then, a good percentage of them aren't moving forward. This software has eliminated all of that, and it's just made the numbers, the operating model so much more efficient and effective. But totally agree with your point. You need to be able to show it. It needs to be directly tied to a value in the business. And I think that will become part of the pitch, part of the presentation is having that in place.
So last thing on this, how do they get business? This is sales and marketing. And I hear young brands, young franchisors, or people that want to franchise their business say, man, I got so many referrals. Our business is all referral. I'm like, that's great from a net profit standpoint, but from something that you could show others where they could spend more and make more in marketing and drop more to the bottom line, there's nothing that's duplicatable, replicatable about that. And how do you get business to even start to get those types of referrals? Or we all know if it's all out referrals that are not current customers, it takes a while to build that up. So what are some of the best franchisors that you've seen that are leaps and bounds above everybody else with sales and marketing?
I think that it probably starts before you even get to like the actual ways you generate leads and sell. Henry Kim would know more about this than I do, but structuring your model where it's membership based, where it's residual, where it's repeatable, as much as possible. I mean, it depends on the industry we're in. But if we're still figuring out what the model is that we're going to franchise and how to approach the market, love businesses. And as you can probably pick out from all the successful brands out there, the market loves businesses that have membership-based revenue. So I'm not having to constantly hunt to get my next deal to keep feeding this thing. So the more we can tie people into residual revenue streams and have repeatable revenue, I think that would be ideal. But once we start just looking at how we sell, the reality is that the truth is that in every business, there's an element of, look, you need to knock on doors, you need to get uncomfortable, and you need to close business. The reality is that new franchise buyers don't want to hear that. They're scared, they're nervous about that idea. So I would, if it's a business that requires an outbound business development focus, certainly I think you need to be careful on who you let in, screen hard, qualify hard. And I have done plenty of franchises where we let the wrong people in who did not get or weren't comfortable in business development roles. And it was a business development model. And it's a nightmare, so I think that's part of it, making sure that we have the right operator, the right people, and not being afraid to say no to someone, even when they're willing to write a check. As much as we can make our lead gen and our marketing digital and structured, obviously that's duplicatable. I've had good experiences where the franchisor is controlling the lead spend, controlling the ad spend. And I think it's kind of inherent for any new business owner, which most franchise owners are that, they haven't been in business for too long of a time period. they skimp on marketing. It's like the first thing that gets pulled as soon as the budgets get tight and they start to get scared and nervous. It's like the worst possible thing you can do. So I would recommend, if you can, look at a way of controlling the lead spend and the ad spend. If you don't have resources in-house, there's a ton of great third-party resources you can go to, that can run PPC campaigns, that can run social media campaigns. Those are, the low-hanging fruit here, where you just geo-target wherever that franchisee's market is. You need to have an integrated, full-scale sales solution, great CRM, great, digital managed social media management, because it's one thing just to generate the lead. It's the next thing to convert that lead. And if you don't have access to a full understanding of what that franchisee is doing with the lead from lead to close, you're not going to be able to track them. You're not going to be able to hold them accountable, and you're not going to be able to really know what's working or what's not working. So I would definitely recommend getting a solution like that in place. The other thing is, all of these systems, you have to be using it and you have to embrace it. Again, going back to my earlier comment, there's some great entrepreneurs that I've worked with. And in part of this development process, I'll be like, hey, you should implement a CRM system. You need to have that. And they refuse to use it themselves. So they don't really know how to coach on it. They don't know how to access it. They don't know how to really leverage that technology. You need to be the first one to use it. You should never be using the franchisees as a guinea pig. It should be coming from you. You should be trying different platforms, making sure you have the best one, and then actually using the data. As a franchisor, and this is probably as important in marketing and business development as it is in any other part of the business, your role it transitions from becoming a doer to becoming holding the franchisees accountable. Your job is to make sure they're hitting the KPIs, they're hitting the numbers you want them to, and that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to be successful.
So the couple points on that, on the sales and marketing, it sounds so simple. Yeah, have reoccurring revenue. And Henry Kim says reoccurring revenue for sure. So it sounds so easy. It's like, yeah, business should have recurring revenue, or try to get it to have recurring revenue. At Mighty Dog, we looked for ways that was even outside of the industry to get reoccurring revenue in that franchise model. And there was other franchisors that I've seen that sold a ton of units and they didn't have their model figured out. They wanted to go reoccurring. They really didn't have it figured out. And they've tried like 5 to 6 different, completely different ways of generating leads, and then having different programs to keep their business model sustainable. It never worked. It was not a good business model. And the franchisees were the ones that were stuck figuring it out. And I'm sure there's not just one brand that's like that. So as somebody that's thinking about starting a franchise, test out those things before you franchise it. That way you are not testing it on the franchisee's dime. And that's to Chris's point. So it may sound so simple, reoccurring revenue, but again, if you're listening to this and you have a model and you're thinking about doing recurring revenue, test it out, try different things, because a lot of franchisees love reoccurring. Private equity loves franchisors with reoccurring revenue. So many great things about it. So try to do that. Another point that Chris made around social media and management and lead generation from Facebook or Google pay-per-click or whatever it is, the biggest aren't always the best. The most popular companies out there are not always the best. And it's a lot of work trying to find really good vendors as a franchisor. I mean, I did it. I was the one that was hunting for vendors in the marketing world. And I know a lot about that world. It was still difficult to find vendors. So I just wanted to echo those points, Chris. Anything to add before we move on?
I think with the franchise community in general, you can, by just working with peers, you can usually figure out what the good vendors are, who the good vendors are. And if you spend time just doing a little bit of discussion amongst people you trust and know in the industry, you can usually come across those pretty quickly. And I always find like it's you know it's pretty common. Like multiple people would tell you the same names, and those are the people.
Yep. The
Check
the
out.
reason
But absolutely, I think at the core. Sorry.
No, I don't know if you were cutting out, but I was cutting out, but go ahead and please finish.
I was going to reiterate on the lead gen side. I think that is critical. I would recommend you try to control as much of that as you can, if possible too. It gives you a leg up, and ultimately it helps more franchisees be successful because they might try to skimp.
So when we say control, or when you say control, I'm hearing have minimum spends for lead generation or minimum spends for marketing, but I'm not sure if you're saying something different.
Well, both. So yes, I would have minimum spends, and I would also prefer that those dollars go either through you as the franchisor or through a vendor that you have direct access to and transparency with. Because then I can make sure these guys are spending the money on the things that I know work, and I can track it. I can manage it. I can oversee it. And then it's easy for me to at least take one of the variables out of this thing. Okay, all 10 of these franchisees are spending the same amount of money with the same vendors. How come these 3 aren't performing? Now I need to look at, how are you managing the sales process? What are you saying to them? Let me listen to your calls. Let me see how many of those people you're taking from lead to consultation. And you as the franchisor can be more effective in managing effectively.
As a franchisor, I like having knowledge and access to what they're spending and things like that. I like that. I don't enjoy or like being having the money go through me. It's just one more thing that the franchisor has to control. And so I'm not a big fan of that. Convince me why I should consider it differently.
I don't necessarily blame you. I mean, I think the less direct responsibilities you have is also a positive thing. But I guess my point is that I want to be able to have my hand in what I feel is the most important part of a successful launch. And franchisees get way easier to manage 6 months into this thing. 6-9 months in, they get it. I mean, now they're past that extreme nervous energy. They're starting to understand some of the nuances. They're not calling you about stuff that's incredibly, basic. And your job as the franchisor gets easier, and you can focus on strategic initiatives. But I find marketing is the one area where, it can make or break people. Every one of these people, not everyone, a large majority of the people that I've convinced to join a franchise system early on, they're ready to jump off the roof of the building, and every day, every week. And a lot of times that's directly related to how quickly we were able to get revenue coming in. And as the franchisor, I want to be able to control that. I want to be able to manage it. And usually I'm going to get better results if they're spending what I know they need to spend. And again, it goes back to validating the model. If we have proven, we know we've tested this thing, we can give advice like that and directives and feel confident about it because we've been through it in enough cases.
So one of the things to think about when and we're going to get into analyzing competition, how to do your territories and your fees and all of that. But before we get to that, you hit on something around franchisees having a good start. One of the things that I've seen, some brands, they have a very solid item 7, which is the expenses. They have a grand opening budget, which includes a lot of marketing. And some franchisors like to have that item 7 as low as they can go. Franchisees get disappointed when it's more than that. Some franchisors like to beef that up because that's what franchisees use to get loans. That's what they use as expectations on what to spend. So if you're a franchisor and you're wanting them to spend $20,000 or $10,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 on grand opening or the first 3 months in the business launch, they're probably going to have a better launch, a better first 3 months in business because they are required to spend so much money. And if that's part of the requirement, they will probably be able to get a loan on some of that because it's just considered part of the business startup expense. then franchisees are going to be happier because they had a stronger launch, and so on and so forth. And then they're used to spending money. They stop spending money on marketing, and they're like, well, probably because I stopped spending money on marketing. The disadvantages to that, and Wes Barefoot could speak to this as a consultant, you might miss out on some candidates because they're saying, why is it going to cost $130,000 for your franchise when I could go buy this other one for $100,000, and the delta is $30,000 of 3 months of marketing your business? And that's, to me, a game changer. But I just want to give some that perspective into it and get your thoughts on that, Chris.
Yeah, and this is a probably, of all the topics we could talk through here, I think this is probably one of the most significant ones, is how you structure your investment range. And if you look at a lot of mature franchises and brands that have 100 locations already, they tend to be more conservative on their investment range, and the numbers tend to be a little bit bulked up. And part of the reasoning for that is there is some degree of liability that if you are underbidding what the franchise investment is, and someone goes out of business and then they're able to prove, hey, this thing was a lot more money than that and they didn't tell me about it, type thing, there's some liability there. I've never seen it happen. I've never seen someone get in trouble for it. And to me, I think when you're a brand new franchise, you have to think differently. You've got to approach the market differently than a mature system. And your system should evolve. I mean, over time, as you add units, you should go into it with the assumption that you're going to change your investment range. You might change fee structures. You might change marketing requirements. All these things can evolve. But if you don't go in with an attractive investment range and something that is appealing and might grab that buyer, that early buyer, you potentially could be missing the boat and not get those early validators that we need. I have seen a lot of systems that went to market, were unable to get those first 3 or 5 locations that validate their model, and they were out of franchising after a year or two. They kind of dropped it. The whole thing fizzled. To me, that is the biggest obstacle to launch this thing, getting that core group of founding member validators that are people we can point to, that are franchisees. We can say, hey, call Joe, call Melissa, ask them about their experience with us. As soon as we get past that, everything we're presenting to people and pitching to people becomes more relevant, more powerful, more impactful, and it's much easier to convert franchisees into the platform. And part of what you have to do to grab those first 3 or 4 founding members is make an attractive, compelling offer that stands up against mature systems. And what we don't have as a new franchise is big economies of scale, big buying power, big brand, a whole bunch of locations we can point to. What we do have is the ability to act and operate more grassroots. Hey, you buy into my system right now as number 1 or 2 or 3, you get me as the founder. I'm going to be there for you. You have my cell phone number. I'm going to coach you. I'm going to go out and help you find used equipment so you can get this thing as low cost as possible. When we first launched Jimmy John's, the low end of the investment was about $140,000. Today, the low end of the investment for Jimmy John's is just over $400,000. And that speaks to my point. They don't have time to mess around with anything that's outside of their channel. You have to use this contractor, this vendor. The space has to be 1,600 to 1,750 square feet. Everything fits into an exact box. But early on, we have the opportunity, and part of our competitive advantage against the big ones is we do have the time, we do have the willingness, and that shows up in our investment range. My advice when you're baking your item 7, your investment range, is be very aggressive on the low and be a bit more conservative on the high. That way you're covering yourself where nobody could say, like, you didn't give me a worst case scenario. But let's just say equipment might be, $50,000 worth of equipment, but hey, you can go out and get it used for $10,000 and I'll be willing to help you find it. Let's make 10 the low and, maybe 50 or 75 is the high. For a lease, let's factor in, we might be able to make a smaller space work in a more aggressive location. Let's give them a low end of the lease range. it's those kind of things that I think are critical. Or if you look exactly like one of the big brands when you go to market, the big brand's going to beat you. And they have more to offer. They have more resources. They have a bigger team. They have more proof. We need to be aggressive. We need to think grassroots. And then our approach, we've got deals done and begin to prove out our platform.
Yeah. And so just to bring a different angle to that, existing franchisor or franchisors with experience of being a franchisor before they're probably going to act like an existing franchisor. They start up a new one, but they're going to treat it like you've got to use this vendor. You've got to have the best tile. You've got to have the nicest trucks. They've got it because that's their experience. So even if it's a new brand with a franchisor with franchisor experience, they're probably going to be going that higher end route. And so just know that if you're going up against somebody in the sales process with that, that's still an advantage for you. If your advantage is we're young, we're nimble, you don't have to buy everything, you don't have to go as big, do everything as expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's still a selling point for you. And then if you're a franchisor, getting started, just know who you're getting your advice from. If it's somebody that's been in franchising forever, they're going to give you different advice than Chris is giving you right now. They're probably going to say, go high end, have an expensive vendor for these different things because it's going to be less headache for you. But then to Chris's point, you don't have anything that's really differentiating you as a young franchisor when you're dealing with some of these different franchise buyers. Anything else to add to that, Chris, before we're going to take Henry's question, because I want to make sure we get questions asked, and then we've got some other things to hit. So anything else to add to that?
I think no. Let's jump into Henry's.
And man, feel free to disagree with me too. We can have some banter back and forth to be like, Eric, you're an idiot for thinking that. Don't feel bad about that. Everyone else will get a kick out of it, and I'll get my feelings hurt.
Cool.
All right, Henry. Come on in, man. If you're free to ask a question, why don't you ask?
So Chris, obviously you're kind of, working with new emerging franchisors. What are you seeing in terms of what are some of the markets out there that you think have some really big potential? And, with some of the emerging franchisors that you're working with?
I definitely tend to gravitate to service models. Eric mentioned Mighty Dog as one of those. I love models that serve that do home services, landscaping, fencing, painting, roofing. I think all those categories have just ballooned because so many people are putting money back into their homes. I still like fitness. I think it's just starting to come back to life here, but I think with the right fitness model, you can develop something that's scalable. I love membership based. I think that's why I like that category a lot. Services in general though is definitely where I would focus. Margins, you can't Amazon it. People still need to deal with a person, hire someone. But home services to me would be kind of the low hanging fruit right now. It's just an absolute no brainer if you can find the right model. And there's just so many examples of it that have scaled exceptionally well. The numbers are so easy to pitch too. Investment range is generally reasonable. ROI is quick and easy with strong margins. As we've talked about before, pet services too, I think is one that's a tough one to beat. A lot of great brands in that category, and people will always spend money on their pets. Although I think we're on the tail end of this thing here, you have to be conscientious of anything that could be shut down with COVID. And so I'm taking that into account in any business that I'm looking at too. And I think you have to be aware of that. But service is what I would look at first. If it's a clean slate, if I've got a wide open choice.
And that brings up a good point with COVID. If you have a business, it was successful, not as successful during COVID, don't discount getting it ready to franchise, because there are rules that are new through the Federal Trade Commission on how you account for COVID in your FDD. So don't discount COVID hurting your business a little bit as, boy, it's not franchisable now. Chris, is this where
Great.
you get to disagree with me, or are we agreeing?
No, I agree. And I mean, you know, I think the restaurant space is like your perfect example to epitomize that comment. There's a lot of restaurants that obviously got crushed, and you know, we're still selling restaurant deals, and a lot of times the item 19s for these brands are showing kind of abysmal, beaten down numbers. But you're right. There's a lot of commentary around that in the FDD that allows you to talk through, you know, how COVID played a role. And I think I think people get it. I mean, we all understand the brevity of what we went through and how that would have impacted certain businesses. I do think that I think you need to take it into account. And if you're looking at the food service space, or you're in the food service space, it was already headed this way before COVID, and now it's fast forwarded. Off premise is the way to go. I keep bringing up Jimmy John's, but he and the Longhorn Steakhouse or Texas Roadhouse guys just bought 7 Brew Coffee, double drive-through coffee model. Everything that's off premise, you know, is where it's headed, where you know, where it's been and where it's headed. So I would,
and typically more profitable. I've been talking to some of the larger franchisees of Burger King, Wendy's, excuse me. And they're like, we're more profitable because we're doing so much drive-through now. And they love that during COVID. I don't know what it's like now, but when COVID happened, they're like, we cut down our staff. We don't do as much clean. We don't do all of this other stuff. And they're like, he's like, I'm thinking about not opening up my restaurant and just going drive-through. So, you know, I don't know how that ended up turning out, but there's something to be said about that.
There's a reason why Chick-fil-A still is not opening up their dining rooms. These models are making more money just throwing food in people's car windows.
Okay, one more question I've got from Joe. I'm going to ask this, and I'm going to ask it in a way I don't want to talk about brand names or the industry, but I want to talk about because this is going to go to all kinds of franchise people that are thinking about franchising their business. And that's why there's no need to get into the specifics of that, but would be very interested to know, Chris, from your perspective, what do you think about a new to franchising industry? It's an industry that's been around for a long time, but it's new to franchising, never really been franchised before. Success as a mom and pop business with multiple locations, but never been franchised before. Does that excite you? Does it scare you? What are your thoughts on successful mom and pop businesses in industries that have never been franchised before?
You know, I overall, it excites me. I think that there's a ton of upside when you're talking about a space that has not been overly branded. And a lot of times that means there's an opportunity to, you know, kind of roll up some of the opportunity in that space. It's a fragmented market. And if we look at some of the giant systems, you know, Massage Envy, European Wax, Modern Acupuncture, I mean, these are brands that did that. They went into a space that was extremely localized and very, you know, mom and pop-ish. And I think they won because they moved first and it became the brand that was associated with that category. So overall, I'd say it's exciting. And I think in general, if you can find an opportunity like that, then and capitalize on it, there's you know, unlimited upside to it. I would go back to what we started with, though. You can have the best industry segment, you can have the, you know, massive consumer demand. You need to define how you get a client, get a customer, interact with that customer, close that customer, collect payment, repeat. You know, that part of it, we do not skip past the necessity to make sure that part is modeled.
I
But
would also add to that, is it going to be better with COVID and post-COVID consumer habits, or is it going to be worse because of that? And I think that's going to be, you know, that's an important thing to consider, if that made sense.
it does. And I mean, you know, without bringing up the industry here, Joe, I mean, that the one you're talking about certainly has gotten better with COVID, just more people in need. But yes, I think you have to take that into account. Where are industry trends going? How are people spending and buying, and where the demand is headed? And I think that's a good point. I mean, everything we are talking about when we're talking about launching a franchise platform always comes back to consumer demand. Whatever it is that we're doing, let's make sure that there is a big enough, broad enough consumer market to justify scaling this. And if we rewind, 10 years ago to frozen yogurt, good example of there's a great market. There wasn't enough of a market for 10 of those things in every ton, which, is in some cases what happened. So if we look at the consumer market, make sure that there's an increasing trend, make sure that there's not any sort of hidden landmines that, we're not aware of that have prevented others from doing this in that space. I think it's great. And for the same reason why it generates excitement in you and us, talking about it, will also create excitement from franchise investors.
So, different direction now. And then I promise we're going to get into analyzing competition, setting up fees and territories, because that's a really difficult thing, territories, to even start to, it can be a difficult subject to tackle and thing to execute. But before we get to that, what are some of the franchise friendly markets where, let's say it's a good brand and the brand can work in all of the states? What are the states that typically sell out very fast or big markets? And I know Denver is one of those. Denver's a market that typically sells out very fast, but a lot of people don't think about this as a young franchisor getting into franchising. So what are some of those markets that you've come across that's like, it seems like these markets always sell out pretty quickly for these franchisors?
Yeah. And it's changed since COVID. I mean, we've definitely seen a bit of a shift in where growth is happening and where franchise deals are happening. And I can personally attest to the fact that we had the best year in franchise sales we've ever had in 2020. And this year we're maybe 50% up on that. COVID has absolutely driven entrepreneurship. The numbers are like staggering. I saw some statistic last year, 20 was more than double the amount of businesses started than ever before in the US. And this year is on pace to double that. It's just exponential growth. And some percentage of those people end up in the franchise market. So timing for, launching something, building something is certainly good. But with certain states being restricted and certain states, not allowing business to operate and shutting down. I'm from Illinois, so I can rip on, some of those states too, I think. And, those states have been tough to sell in, whereas Texas, Florida, Arizona, Tennessee, Georgia, all the southern states, the Sun Belt absolutely are the hot markets. You cannot get any hotter than Florida and Texas with the influx of people, influx of money and funding. I put those at the top, maybe Tennessee with it. But I think it's important that you keep an open mind on where you might be targeting, but there's also states that require registration. And I don't know how much you've gone through registration requirements.
Yeah, we won't get into that too much, but you can hit that at a high level because it's important for people to understand, but that's probably, a little bit deeper, but yeah, hit that real quick.
And most of the states that have been COVID restricted are also registration states, and they've been backed up because of COVID. So it's even tougher to get through some of them, which again would push me to say, look at the South, look at the states that are generally more business friendly. Those are the low hanging fruit. There's people that are moving to those markets and need opportunities. They're ripe for who we want to talk to, people who are in the midst of a change, looking for something they could do in that new market. And, if we can focus our lead gen and our promotions to those areas, then that's going to give us a leg up.
Let's hit analyzing competition, setting up fees and territories.
So this goes back to the earlier comment. I think it's very important that you understand who you're going up against. And there's two versions of franchise competition. One is I sell hamburgers, so I'm going to compete with everyone else selling hamburgers. The other is I sell hamburgers, I'm going to compete with people selling sub sandwiches, chicken restaurants, pizza restaurants, anyone in food potentially is going to be a competing offering for me in my franchise. It's important that we know who we're going up against, where they position, franchise fees, royalties, territory model, marketing fund. I don't know that that you have gone through this as well, but there's certain states, California, Minnesota, you can download FDDs from these states and pull down documents, use it. It's a resource to figure out what these other brands are doing. You can see their success rates, units open, units closed type thing. And you can certainly get all the key business metrics from those. Take the time, do the analysis, figure out where you're positioning against them. This again, though, I would recommend come in lean and aggressive when you first go to market. That's my advice. You want to be standing out when you're compared against brands that maybe have more proof of concept. You can increase everything after you get units on the board. I want to see number of units open, number of units closed, franchise fee, royalty, marketing fund, territory size. I want to get a feeling for what they're doing for training, how they're supporting franchisees, and I suppose regionality to where those markets are that they've opened and where they've developed them. For territory modeling, typically we will end up with a population count. It's just the easiest one to track, and we can pull census data for any market. So let's say, we end up with a territory of 250,000 people for a market. We use a software called Mapline. Throw it out there. It's a pretty affordable software solution. It's easy to use. We definitely recommend taking a look into it. It allows you just to upload data and build maps pretty quickly. One thing I will caution you on is I would not spend a year building territory maps. Inevitably, your first deal is going to land right in the middle of your territory maps, and it's going to blow up your whole grid. So I would get a feeling for it, just so you have an idea. Where I have found it makes sense is you're in South Florida and you really want to focus just on South Florida. Then you could probably justify mapping out like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, and do it. But I would not spend the time to map out the whole country. It is good to have a feeling for it. Territories are one of the best negotiating points that I've found. I'd rather use territory to negotiate than fees. So my first deals, I would recommend going with a bigger space. Let people have the opportunity to have a bigger market to choose from. A brand that we launched in 2010, Restoration One, they do like water, fire, mold remediation. Our opening territories, which maybe we gave a little bit too much, but we sold 1 million population for our first 4 markets. Today, a territory is 125,000 people. So it's come down like that over time. Those first people bought in and ended up becoming our validators. He was able to grow to 320 units, and he had a big exit 2 years ago now. And I don't think he would have gotten traction in that market had we not gone with that kind of an offer. Like, we're going to give you a big space.
Well, I want to argue with you a little bit. I love that. And I agree with that. And we did that at brands that I've been a part of. You buy 3, get 1 free and things like that. As a franchise, I agree that that is what, was the catalyst to growth, validation, all these things. But looking back, I would rather have given up a franchise fee for sure. Like, the franchise fee would be easier to give up than a large territory when you look at an exit, most likely. But you need to be, the point of that is, it's just teasing you, Chris, but the point of it is be ready to give up something that's significant. Either it hurts right away or it's going to hurt in the long run. I've talked to too many young franchisors. They don't want to give up a franchise fee. They don't want to give up a bigger territory because they think they've got something that is absolutely amazing, but nobody's buying it. So it's friends and family. Be generous, give up something, because just because you think what you have is so amazing, until you have a number of franchisees that are telling you it's so amazing, it might not be so amazing.
Definitely the case. And I think regardless of what you choose to use as your carrot, having that mentality of I need to be aggressive to get people in, that's the key. I mean, my first 8 years in this business, I saw way more brands fail because they didn't get those first validators in than for any other reason. That was it. And the companies that worked were aggressive. They were negotiating deals. They were coming up with ways to get those people in. And the companies that were not successful said, this is our fee. We're not budging. It's worth more than that. And it was that kind of a position.
I would give up 1 million population territories to 4 people to have a large exit when they had a large exit any day. So that was a good move. Hold on, Caleb, what? Okay. Sorry. We'll cut that out. Last thing, we talked about negotiating first deals. What are some different ways to launch these brands? Because they could go to Chris Connor. They could go to Lane Fisher. Lane is a franchise attorney that's helped tons of people with their franchise disclosure document, but it stops at the franchise disclosure document. That's a route to go. It's going to be more work for the franchisee. And they go to Chris, what do they get? So kind of explain the 2 different routes going with you versus going the traditional route, which a lot of people go, find an attorney, finding someone to help them with franchise development, which I do, or putting together the ops manual. And you do so many things for them. You're a one-stop shop. You do so many things that they don't have to think about. So what's the difference between going with Chris and then going a different route?
I mean, that definitely summarizes it. We are doing planning, market research, positioning. We work with a law firm to do the FDD and agreements. We write the training and ops manuals. We do all the marketing development to be able to position the franchise, like a development website, brochures, pitch decks, application forms. All that stuff gets wrapped into it. I know Lane well, and I would say he's the best in the business when it comes to legal counsel, franchise legal counsel. Maybe you could throw like Robert Zarco or DLA Piper in there. I mean, these are like, heavy hitter law firms. You would get a lot of value in having Lane Fisher as your legal counsel and in having his name on your letterhead. Like just the fear factor of having a name like that is really significant. So I wouldn't want to dissuade anyone from going to someone like Lane. I think if that's the route, you need to also consider talking with someone like us to do the pieces that wrap around it, the manuals, the plans, all the marketing components that go into it. This is not a knock on any one of those legal, firms, but this is where I have seen a lot of brands never get off the ground. Is they spend, and Lane's probably the most reasonable of all of those, but they spend a lot of money on legal counsel. They get to the point where they have an FDD and they're like, okay, I'm ready to franchise. Where are my franchisees? And it's like, well, you only have one piece of this thing in place. And it's not like people are going to buy your franchise because you have an awesome contract for them to sign. So as long as you have fully planned how you intend to go to market and made sure that, if you're going to incorporate a Lane Fisher, that you also have the budget to build out these other pieces. Most importantly, I would say that you also have the budget to execute this thing, to promote it, to advertise it, to generate the leads. And this again is where my first 8 years doing this, I saw companies spend $150,000 on documents and then expect by the time they were done for people to show up and hand them franchise fees. And it's like, that's not how it works. You're at the starting line then, and you need to fuel this thing. The beautiful thing about franchising is that it feeds itself quickly. Once we start collecting fees, we have royalties. It's all high margin stuff. But it's that gap between day one and franchise fees coming in that, that's probably where the graveyard is the most full of franchisor headstones. So definitely big advocate for Lane, though. I think he's one of the few lawyers too who's like a genuine person and a business guy too. So I totally would advocate for him when it comes to legal counsel.
And that's a good point, because Lane is very reasonable for being so stinking good at what he does. You don't necessarily get what you pay for, because you can go to someone that's a franchise attorney that's not nearly as good that you'll be paying twice as much for. And that's not good. And that's why I want to do these things like this with you, Chris, because you give very sound advice. You have a very unique niche in the industry where people that want to get in at a very affordable, reasonable price to have it all done for you with you is fantastic. So I appreciate you coming on. Any last bits of wisdom for the crew? Do you have anything really smart to say, Chris? Or did you? Yeah. All right. I'm going to end it like this. Chris, thanks for coming on with dropping a bunch of wisdom, and I'll talk to you soon. All right. Caleb will cut that up at the end. Can anybody else hear me, or am I frozen? Okay. Okay. James, great to see you, man. You came on in the last 10 seconds.
The link didn't work.
That's good to know. What did it say so we can not have that happen again? It's the same link, right, Caleb?
It said there was a meeting already in progress. They'll let you in when it starts. And I did it multiple times. And it never let me in.
Were you coming in when it was starting, or was it too late? Like, did anybody else have any problems with that? All right. So I think it might have been because you came in too early. Were you there at the very end? I mean, like when it was just getting started too?
I never saw anything. I just joined. I got a text from Caleb who followed up with me. Thank you, Caleb. But
he's over there.
Yeah, it just didn't work.
Well, we'll troubleshoot that a little bit. Yeah, Caleb heard all that and he's taking notes. So we'll get the replay out sooner than later. And yeah, if anybody has any problems like that, text me or Caleb. So sorry about that, James. Chris, you froze, and I just as you were frozen, I thanked you for coming on, and I said a bunch of horrible things about you, and then I stopped. No, man, that was good. That was really good. And again, I appreciate like you bring in transparency to things and just, the work that you do. And like, Henry's told me, like, Henry's the one I've known about you before, but Henry said, hey, you and Chris need to touch base. And so thank you, Henry, for doing that. And then, we've spent time on the phone, Chris, just, getting to know each other. And Wes, you should, if you're listening, I see your beautiful, headshot there, but I know that you get people that want to franchise their business, and you should just like send them to Chris as one of the people that you send them to as a reasonable cost solution. And he will follow up with them right away. I just sent Chris somebody the other day. I'm a big influencer. He tried to call me when he was on his private jet, and I'm like, I'm busy. And I sent him over to Chris, and Chris followed up with him right away, and they had a call right away. So I know when we send people as consultants to other people that do the same thing, it's crickets. So just wanted to let you know that, Wes, and any other consultants out there. Guys, I got like 5 minutes. Anything else that you want to ask Chris? I'm going to stop the recording. We're not recording. We can talk about what we talked about earlier or anything that you want to talk about. Let me open up to Joe.
In the last 50 minutes.
Yes. Joe Cox, did you have any follow-ups that you wanted to ask?
Well, I guess
Caleb, stop the recording.
I'm curious to know about the ways a franchisor